Hello everyone. So I'm back with another video, and in this video I'm going to show you how can we use Refit Client to connect our .NET MAUI app to an API which is hosted locally on our system using localhost on HTTPS protocol. So before this one I already have created couple of videos for this purpose, so those were using. So first I have these two videos in which I showed you how can we connect using HTTP client. In first video I shown how can we connect to API which is hosted on HTTP. Then there is one more video which is over HTTPS. Then I created one more video in which I showed you how can we use HTTP client factory to connect our .NET MAUI to HTTPS localhost API. So all this code was raw. We in .NET we have one library which is Refit, by which we can get some layer of abstraction and which makes our developers life easier to create HTTP API clients basically. So we can do write less and do more kind of thing. So we need to write very less code, and then it can create all that HTTP client request response, all that it can generate itself. So in this video I'm going to show you a way by which how can we use this Refit client to connect to our API. So I have prepared this simple project. First thing, I have this Refit client MAUI .NET MAUI project. Then I have this API project, and then I have this shared project. So in shared, I have these three simple models. So logged in user details, which has ID, name, email, and role. Then this login request DTO, username, password. We can use this to log in. And then I have this auth response DTO. So this is the response which what our login API returns. So it has user ID, name, email, role, and one token, which is going to be this JWT token. Then I have this API, and in API I have set up two controllers. First one is public controller. So this is the same default template which this Visual Studio gives us, the default template which returns weather forecast. So I simply rename that to public controller, change this HTTP route to HTTP get and weathers, and then this is same. After that I have this one method to login, which is in post method, and inside this I'm not using this login request DTO. We don't have any database or anything set up for this simple project. So main focus of this is going to be on MAUI side, how can we connect to this API. So here I'm just simply creating a logged in user with hard coded values. Then I'm generating a token using this token service which I have in this services folder. So I have created this token service and iToken service interface. In this I'm simply generating a JWT token, basically whatever details I have provided. I'm simply fetching the details from there and creating claims and then generating this JWT. For this I have installed couple of packages: authentication JWT bearer, then identity model token, and system identity model tokens.jwt. I have added these three NuGet packages. Then in program.cs, but before that in app settings.development.json, I have added this JWT value in which I have added these key issuer expiry minutes, these some default values. You can modify it as per your need. And in program.cs I'm registering. First I have added this builder.services.add authentication to add the authentication with default JWT scheme. Then I'm setting JWT bearer options, token validation parameters. This is coming from our token service only. And then I have simply added this token service and iToken service interface as transient so that we can use it. After that I have modified this. I have added app.use authentication to add the authentication to our API. And then right now I'm having this hard-coded this URL and port on which I want my API to run. You could have it, leave it blank, and it will use the default from launch settings, which is properties and launch settings. But most of the time I prefer this fixed value. You could get it from database or from anywhere, so that's up to you, but I'm using this value so that I can directly use it in our MAUI client. Cool. So I had this public controller in which weather forecast and login, and after that I have this private controller which is a protected controller. I have added authorize attribute to it. So this has only one method, which is saying get my profile. So private slash my profile will be route for this, and user needs to be logged in. That means user needs to be authorized. It should have that JWT token in its header in order to get the value from this endpoint. And in this endpoint, I'm just fetching ID, name, role, email from the token. So when we have JWT token, we can get those from user claims. I'm getting all these claims, creating this logged in user and returning this value directly. So nothing fancy, nothing. So this is the simple API setup. And for this token service and JWT token, if you want me to create a dedicated video for this, do let me know in the comment. I will plan a dedicated video in which I'm going to show you how can we use JWT, how can we use JWT token to generate the tokens, authenticate users, and all other kind of stuff using JWT tokens. I can plan a video for this. Do let me know in the comment if you need a separate video for this. Okay, and for this video, in this MAUI project, what I have done on our main page, I simply remove all other things, whatever had the defaults. I cleaned the code behind. There's nothing in it except this constructor. And on this main page.xml, I have simply added couple of labels and buttons. So first weather label and weather button, so that for this one, when we will click on this weather button, this fetch weather forecast, when we click on this, it will going to the API and it will get the result for this weathers. Then we have this login. So when we tap on this, it should go to the API and fetch the JWT token and other details. And then this third one, fetch my profile. So it should go to the private controller I just showed you. Then from that it requires token and we need to fetch the values for this one. So that's all for the intro. So basically this is all what we'll do in this. Now if you are familiar with Refit or you're not familiar with Refit, that's also fine. So before this, as I showed you in the my playlist, I'm going to add the playlist link and all these videos link in my description box. So please do check those out if you want to have some different if you want to know some different ways to connect to API. So in first two videos, we were using HTTP client. In this third video, we were using HTTP client factory, but we had to write some code. Most of the send request, handling response, and all those logic by ourselves. But using Refit, all this it will be handled by Refit. We just need to configure our Refit basically. So what we'll do, we are not going to use raw HTTP client for this, but we'll use Refit. So first step is to add the Refit NuGet package. So for this, we'll go to manage NuGet packages. I'm on MAUI project, browse, and here we can use refit.http client factory. This is the package we are going to use. So we have this, and I'm going to install this. Internally, this is going to install Refit, which is the core package. So we don't need to install it explicitly. I'm installing it, apply, and it got installed. If we go here, we can see it in our CS Pro. So we have installed this package. Cool. Now, first thing, did I already added the project reference? Yes. So this shared project, this is being referenced from both of these API and MAUI. So first let me show you the API first before doing anything. Let me start the API and I'll show you in the Swagger how it looks. Looks like it is running. So let me copy the URL from API program. We have this 7130. And did I added this in here? Say, okay, 7130. So let's use this. So we'll have HTTPS and then this. We already had HTTPS. Let's try this. This did not run. Okay, it is running. Okay, Swagger index.html, fine. We have these three endpoints, private and public. So first, let me show you this private one. If we try it out, execute it, so we'll say response status is 401, that is unauthorized access. We are not authenticated, we don't have token, so we cannot fetch data from this one. Cool. Then we have this public weathers, so this will give us the data without any issue because this is not a protected route. Great. And then we have this login. If we try it out, we can execute it with the default value because we are not using these things. So from here we can get the data. That means public are public without authentication, without JWT, these are going to work. And then this private one, for this we need token. Okay, let's get back to here in MAUI side. Apart from this, what I have done, if you have followed my previous videos, there is one issue when we run our app in emulator. This is a totally different environment, different device, different OS. So from there, right now we are running our API on localhost. So localhost is respective to our Windows. Currently I'm on Windows OS. So it is related to our Windows OS only, Windows device. So I'm running API on Windows and I'm trying to connect it from this Android emulator. So this is not going to work because localhost for this Android is different. So for this, we need to tell that the URL is going to different. That is not going to be localhost from Android emulator. That is first issue. Then second issue we have, when we run HTTPS, that is not a globally acceptable certificate. We are running HTTPS locally. That means this is a certificate which we have added. So for this, allow this HTTPS, localhost HTTPS from our Android emulator and iOS emulator. We need to do some additional stuff, so that I have already added in our code. So you can get this from the same videos. So these two videos, you can check this HTTPS one. So here I showed you in details how can we do this. So I have added this iPlatform HTTP message handler. This is an interface. From here we are returning this HTTP message handler. So in order to allow HTTPS from our Android emulator and iOS emulator, we need to provide our own HTTP message handler. And for this to work, I have added some custom code in platforms Android and iOS folders. So in Android, I have created this new file, Android HTTP message handler. This is an implementation of iPlatform HTTP message handler. And from here, we are returning an Android message handler by providing a value for this server certificate custom validation callback. And from here, we are allowing this localhost certificate. So all this you can see in details in that video. And for iOS as well, we are returning NS URL session handler. And from here also we are just allowing localhost. So that's all I have done in all this. And then I have registered this iPlatform HTTP message handler in our MAUI program. So I'm adding it singleton. So if this is Android, return Android HTTP message handler. If it is currently running on iOS, then return iOS HTTP message handler. And right now we are doing this for these two mobile platforms only. So I have this, and apart from this, just return null. So we don't need any other platform. Cool. So that's all we have done. Now for Refit, first thing we have installed that Refit client, refit.http client factory. Now we need to create our, I am going to say, call it, let's say, services. So here what I'll do, first I'll create an, it should be an interface. How Refit works, we just need to define interfaces and then it is going to generate code for us. So we have two APIs, two controllers, one is public, one is private. So let's call it iPublic API. You can name it whatever you want. So it is going to be in public interface, iPublic API. And on public API, we have two endpoints, right? In public, we have this get weather and login. So let's go here. Here we just need to define the methods. So what we'll do are this one are weathers. It returns this enumerable. So we can use it like this, weather forecast, and this weather forecast. Okay, this is defined in our API. So let's get a copy of this and move it to shared. So let me move it to shared and let me adjust the namespace. It should be shared. Save everything. This is coming from API. Okay, let's stop the API. Weather forecast. Delete this one. And public controller we have from shared. Okay, everything works fine. Now we can get it from shared. So we are good. And this name is up to us. We can name it whatever we want. So this is the simple interface method. Now we need to add an attribute to this, and that attribute is going to be, in this case we are using this get, which will come from Refit, and we need to provide the URL. So for our public controller's URL, this will be this controller, that means slash public slash weathers. So this is going to be public slash weathers like this. Now we are good. We just need to do this thing and it has automatically generated the implementation for this. Now we have one more method here, which is this login. So let's get the signature, auth response, login request due to you like this. And here this should be post. So we can decorate it with post. And this time it should be public slash login. Save everything and now we are good with this. Okay, before continuing further, let's add the second one as well. So that was iPrivate API. These names are up to you. You can name it whatever you want. In this, we only had one method, which is get only, which is private slash my profile. So here we'll say private slash my profile, and let's get the signature. Its return type is logged in user, and here let's say get my profile, something like this. And now we are good. We just needed this thing, these interfaces. These are going to create contact for us. There is one more thing I'll show you when we'll reach here, but right now we are good. Next thing, let's configure these things. So for this, let's go to MAUI program, and here we are going to create a method. Inside this only, let's create a method. We'll say static void, and we'll say configure Refit, and we will expect service collection services for this one. And now we need to configure a Refit client, and that is what we are going to do. First thing, before this, we need to add this private API, public API. So how we can do this? We can simply say services dot add Refit client, and then the type, that interface. We had I public API. Great, this is the basic simplest form of registration. But now there is one problem. The problem is, okay, but before that, let me show you that. After this, we need to configure our HTTP client. So we'll say configure HTTP client, and we need to add that base URI. So we'll say var base URI equals new URI. Okay. And this is going to be our HTTPS localhost 7130. And we are good with this one. Then second thing is do this and like this for I private API. I am having these two only, that's why I'm having like this. If you have multiple, then we can make some collection and we can look through those and register those. So there could be multiple ways. This is the simplest form which I'm showing you. Now next thing is we set this, we cannot use this HTTPS directly, right? Sorry, this localhost directly, because the localhost does not belong to the same localhost inside this emulator, right? So for this, we need to tell it that you need to make this URI dynamic on the basis of platform. So for this, what we can do, instead of directly using this, what we can do, let's say word base URL. Here we will first check what is a device platform. So here we'll say device info dot platform. If this is Android, device platform dot Android. If this is Android, then you should use HTTPS. Instead of localhost, we need to use 10.0.2.2. This is the loopback address which Android emulator uses with the same port. And for all other, we can use this localhost only. Now we have this base URI setup, base URL. Now what we'll do, we have this HTTP client, we need to add the base address for this. So we'll say HTTP client dot base address equals new URI and this base URL, and we are good with this. Save. We need to copy this here as well. Instead of doing this, we can simply extract a method here. So we'll say static, and let's see what it requires. It requires an action delegate with one parameter of HTTP client. So we can say static void, and let's say we'll say set HTTP client, or it could be anything. You can name it anything. So set HTTP client, and we'll get HTTP client using this. And then we can simply cut this code, add it here like this, and then use this thing directly inside configure HTTP client like this. Same thing here for the private API. Great. Now everything is fine. Now if we try to run it, we are going to face an issue, and that is going to be for this HTTPS. The certificate, this is not valid, right? It can work on our browser locally on our OS, but it is not going to work on Android emulator and iOS emulator. So for this, we need to implement our own implementation of HTTP message handler, which I showed you like this, I platform HTTP message handler, and we are providing different implementations on the basis of environment. For Android, we have Android HTTP message handler. For iOS, we have iOS HTTP message handler. So we need to use those to configure a Refit client, and that we can do inside this. So we have one more flavor of this method. You see, we can use Refit settings. Then we have another one, which is a func delegate, which gets iService provider and returns Refit setting. So we are going to use this one. So here we could say SP, which is service provider, and from here we need to return an implementation of an instance of Refit setting. this like this and remove this gray. Now we need to use this Refit setting. For this one, we have one property here, which is something like HTTP message handler factory. And this is a func of HTTP message handler. So we can use this to return our own implementation, which we had as a part of this I platform HTTP message handler. So now we need to just fetch the implementation of this one. For this, we have this service provider here. So here we'll say message handler equals, we can say sp dot get required service of type this interface. Like this. Now we have this message handler. From here, we could directly say message handler dot get HTTP message handler. And now we are good. Now again, we need to do the same thing for the second one. So it's better to extract a method, and we'll use the same signature. So for this, let's create one more method here. We'll say static. It should return Refit settings. We'll say configure Refit settings, something like this. It is going to get iService collection services. Or not iService collection, it should be service provider. Service provider. So let's call it SP. Cool. Now we can simply cut this thing from here, paste here. And now we can directly use this method here. So we'll say like this. And same thing we can use for the second one. Cool. Everything looks fine now. Single lines. Now let's use this configure Refit method in here. So in our create MAUI app, we will simply say configure Refit and we'll pass builder.services. Cool. We have joined all the pieces. Refit configuration is done. Now we can directly inject these things and use these things. So in order to use this, let's go to our main page. Here we had these couple of methods. So first we had weather label and weather button. So on this weather button, let's have clicked event, new event handler. Let's go here. Great. First thing, let's inject iPublic API. We'll name it public API from Refit Client MAUI.services like this. And now we can get data from this underscore public API. So we'll say public API dot get weather forecast like this. So we'll say var and let's say weathers equals this, and then we can convert this to string because we wanted to display on that page. So we can say, or we can directly use this. This is weather LBL. So we'll say weather LBL dot text equals JSON serializer dot serialize. I just want to show the data on the page. It will just convert it to string and dump on the weather label. And we should be good with this one. Then let's use the same thing for other as well. So for login button, let's add clicked event for this. Same thing, let's use this profile button. So clicked and profile button clicked. Great. So let's go in code behind. We have login button clicked. So for this one, we'll say var response equals, we have this public API dot login, and we need to pass this login request DTU. So we are not using it, but let's pass some dummy values. So we can use string.empty, string.empty. Now we have this response, and from this response we can extract the token. Okay, and we can write this to token lbl, this one. So we'll say token lbl dot text equals response dot token. Now let's profile btn. Profile, this exists in iPrivate API. So let's inject iPrivate API as well. Private API, private API, great. And here we'll say response equals, and from here we can say our private API dot get my profile, like this. And this needs to be displayed on this profile lbl. So we'll say profile lbl dot text equals JSON serializer dot serialize our response. Cool. Now we know this is going to give us some exception because this should be protected. So it will give us 401 error. So let's wrap this inside try catch to check it. And Refit gives us this API exception with all the details. So we can use this. So here, let's say on profile lbl dot text, let's display ex dot message, the exception message from here, and we'll add breakpoints in all these methods. So let's add the breakpoint, add breakpoints. Great. So first thing, we need to run our API, which is not running, I guess. Yes, stop it. And where is our API? API is here. Right click, debug, start without debugging. That's all configuration we need to do. And then we have our page setup. Oh my god, this is not going to work. We have one more issue. We are injecting this. Where is our main page? We are injecting these things which we have already registered, but we are injecting in main page. So we need to register main page as well in the dependency containers. So we'll say builder dot services dot add singleton, and let's add main page here like this. Now we should run it. Cancel build cancel. Okay, let's run it. This is the previous one. Let's go to home and let it build. Okay, and we have some issue, and that is saying argument exception method get weather forecast is invalid. All rest methods must return either task of t or value task of t or I observable. So this is fine. The problem is we are using direct methods in our Refit APIs. So all these should return task. So all these methods are going to be async, because internally it uses HTTP client only, and that uses the send async method most but the case is. So we'll say task of this logged in user, and now let's rename these methods to async. Oh my god, API, let me stop the API also. Stop. Cool, go to public API and wrap these to task, and same goes here, task, and let's rename these to append async. Go to our main page and change this to async, async, async. We need to await these now, so let's add await, await, and await. And for await, all these methods needs to be async. So let me add async and async. Cool. First, let's run API again. So debug, start without debugging. API is running. And then let's run mobile app. Okay, app is here. Now first let's try fetch weather forecast. So we tapped on this. It came here. And we got the data. If we check, we have count 5. That means we got the data from our API. This is fine. We run it, continue, and we can see the data here, right? Fetch weather forecast again. It will change the data. That means the call to our API is working. That's great. Now let's check this fetch my profile. So if I tap this, I am here. Now I'll do this response, and now it returned to this catch. There is some exception. If we check the exception, it says response status code does not indicate success. This is 401 because this call, this is protected, authorized. So we need to add token to this request. So the whole point was to add this thing was to show how can we use token, how can we add HTTP token, JWT token to our HTTP calls using Refit Client. So that's I'm going to show you right now. We can see this error. And for this login one, if we tap this, if we continue, status code does not indicate success, 415 unsupported media type. That means there is some problem. So let's fix that problem first. So for this login async, if we check, it is post. This is fine. Post public login request DTO. This is of type struct. This is of type struct. That means it should be HTTP post. So let's change this struct to just record. The reason is struct is value type, but by default the model binder and all this the for HTTP post, it tries to get the value from the body, and that needs to be in reference type. So we change it to record first thing, and let's check what we have on our API side. So if you go to API controller, public controller, this is post. Okay, we change this to a class. Record is a class, so it should work now. Okay, but before running it, let's fix the token thing. So for that, adding the token, what we need to do, we need to do something on this private control, sorry, not private controller, in our MAUI side, MAUI, in our services, private API. All of these calls are going to be protected inside this private API. So here we can add something which is header and headers, right? So let's use header. For this, we just need to set authorization colon bearer. What is the issue? Header attribute not valid on declaration. It is only valid on parameter declarations. So it should be headers. Save. Edit. Now we are telling that whenever you are calling this method, generating the HTTP call, you should use this header. And now when we provide this header, we need to somehow, if you check, we are not providing value for this. So we just said that it should add authorization header of type bearer, but from where it should get the value. For that, we need to go to the configuration, and where we are setting our Refit settings. We are going to set one more property here, and that is going to be something like authorization header value getter. This is again going to be a func delegate. It will get HTTP request message, cancellation token. It should return a task of string. So we don't need HTTP request message, we don't need cancellation token. For this purpose, we just need to return task of string. So here we'll say we can skip these parameters because we are not going to use them. And from here we need to return something, so we can say task dot from result. Now the value, we need to get the value for authorization header, that bearer. That means we need that token, right? That token we are getting in if we go to our main page main.page.xml, here after login we are getting this token. We need to store this token somewhere so that we can use that somewhere to fetch the value for this Refit setting. So for this, inside our services, let's create a new class. We can call it maybe auth service, token service, or whatever. Let's call it token service. Okay, and it should be public class token service, and in this let's have one property. So we will have it of type string, nullable string, and it should be let's say JWT or maybe token. It should be anything, and we can directly say use this, or maybe we can have some helper method, and we can say this set should be private to this class, and then we can have a method, so where we will say public void set token, and we will get token from outside, and we will set this token here. Look, let's stop, remove everything, we are good. Let's register this token service as singleton so that it will be used from anywhere. It will be the same instance on which we have set the token. So we'll say builder.services.add singleton, and this should be token service. Okay, now we have this token service. We are registering this thing. The way we fetched message handler, same way we are going to get the token service. So we'll say token service equals sp.getRequiredService, and this should be token service. And now inside this task.from result, we will say that you should use token service dot token, and if that is not there, just use a default value string.empty. So this will be for other calls which do not need that token. So here we have simply set it that whenever you are making some call where authorization header is required, just come here and get the value from token services token property. Now we are fetching this, we need to set the value, and we can set it from here, right? We have this token, we need to inject our token service here, so we'll inject it, token service, we'll use a field, and now after showing that token on this token LBL, this logo label, we'll say underscore token service dot set token and response dot token. Now we have the token which will be used by this profile BTN. So right now let's remove all the breakpoints because we know everything going to work. We'll add these if something does not work. Okay, let's first stop it and run the API. So we have API, let me run it, debug, start without debugging. And API is running fine. Let's run the app. This time everything should work. Okay, app is loading. Let's check the first fetch weather forecast. We can get it. This was public, so this is fine. Then fetch my profile. So now we can say this is 401 because we know this is not going to work. We do not have that token. This is working. Now let's try this login. So when we say login, we have this token. That means that call worked first thing, and after setting this token, we are setting this to token service, and from there this can get it. So now let's try this fetch my profile. If we use this time we got the value. You see ID, name, role, admin. That means this call is also working. With this, did we break something? No. Public is working, this login is working, token is changing, and if we do this, this is fine. You see, so all the calls, everything is working dynamically. Private protected route, dynamic configuration, uh, dynamic token, JWT tokens, everything is working. So this is how we can use Refit. You can see it took some time to configure initially these things, but when you will implement it, and maybe for second time or third time, it will be very quick. And after that, it is great that we just need to define interface and then everything works out of the box, right? Great. So that's all for this video. Please do let me know in the comment if you find this helpful and if you are going to use Refit or no in your maybe next MAUI app. Okay, so please like this video, share this video, subscribe my channel. I'll be back soon with some other video. Till then, bye bye, take care and happy coding.